It started with the whispers. No one knows when exactly, but somewhere between the summer heat and the cool autumn breeze, the town of Briar's Hollow changed. It was subtle at first, like a flicker in the corner of your eye or a sound that lingers just on the edge of hearing. The locals chalked it up to the shifting seasons, busy with their routines, harvest festivals, and preparations for winter. But I knew something was wrong. I had heard the whispers. I had seen the darkness between the trees. Briar's Hollow was a small, isolated town surrounded by dense forests. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and no one ever leaves. I grew up there, knew every corner of the town, and every face that passed me on the street. But now, it felt foreign. The familiar street seemed narrower, the shadows longer, and the people quieter, like they were holding their breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. It was mid-October when I first saw it. I was on my way home from the local diner where I worked, cutting through the woods to save time. I'd taken that path hundreds of times, but that night, something was different. The air was heavy, thick with an almost suffocating silence. No rustling leaves, no chirping insects, just the sound of my own footsteps, crunching on dead leaves, and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stopped, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. That's when I heard it, soft at first, almost like the wind through the trees, but with an unnatural edge. Whispers, not the kind you could make out or even comprehend, but the kind that filled you with a creeping sense of dread. I turned slowly, scanning the forest around me, but there was nothing, just the trees, towering and still. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the unease. The path was dark, barely lit by the sliver of a moon above, but I could see the clearing up ahead where the woods met the town. That's when I saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the trees, in the shadows where the light didn't quite reach. It was tall and thin, almost too thin, like a shadow stretched to its limits. Its face, or what should have been its face, was a blank slate. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin. It stood unnaturally still, almost blending into the darkness, as if it was part of the night itself. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't think. Then, it stepped forward. I ran. I don't remember how I made it home. My legs carried me as if they had a mind of their own, fueled by pure terror. I burst through the front door, locking it behind me, my chest heaving with every breath. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? A faceless figure in the woods. No, it was easier to convince myself that it was a trick of the light, a shadow playing games with my tired mind. But the whispers didn't stop. In the days that followed, I noticed changes around town. People were quieter, more reserved. Some looked exhausted, their eyes hollow and sunken as if they hadn't slept in days. Others disappeared altogether, their houses dark, windows covered. When I asked around, people shrugged, muttering excuses. Maybe they left, or maybe they were sick. No one seemed to care. But I did. I hadn't seen the figure again, but I could feel it. Watching, waiting, and the whispers, those damn whispers, grew louder. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I grabbed a flashlight, a thick jacket, and a kitchen knife for good measure, and headed back to the woods. My heart pounded in my chest as I retraced my steps from that night. The air was colder now, biting at my skin, and the silence was worse than before. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I reached the clearing, shining my flashlight through the trees, but there was nothing, just darkness. A part of me was relieved, but another part deep down knew it wasn't over. And then I heard it. Not whispers this time, but footsteps. Slow, deliberate, like someone or something was stalking me. I spun around, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but I saw nothing. Panic set in, and I backed away, keeping my eyes on the woods, searching for any sign of movement. That's when I saw them. Not one, but dozens of figures, standing just at the edge of the trees, faceless and motionless, their pale skin glowing in the dim light. My heart raced, and I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. They didn't move. They just stood there, watching, or at least, I assumed they were watching. Without faces, it was impossible to tell, but I could feel their gaze, cold and unsettling, like a weight pressing down on me. Then, as one, they began to move, gliding toward me without sound, their footsteps eerily synchronized. I turned and ran, my lungs burning as I sprinted back toward town. But no matter how fast I ran, I could still hear them, those silent, rhythmic footsteps growing closer with every second. I reached the edge of the woods, bursting onto the street, and glanced back. The figures had stopped, standing just at the tree line, as if they couldn't or wouldn't cross. I didn't wait to find out. I bolted down the street, not stopping until I reached the safety of my house, slamming the door behind me. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every creak, every gust of wind sent my heart racing. The whispers had returned, louder than ever, and now they carried with them a strange clarity, like voices overlapping, too many to make out, but unmistakably there. I wasn't the only one who heard them. The next day, the town was different. People were on edge, their eyes darting nervously as if they, too, had seen something in the woods. The air buzzed with tension, unspoken but palpable. And then, more people began to disappear. First, it was the old widow who lived on the edge of town. Then the baker and his family, their shop closed with no explanation. One by one, houses went dark, their occupants vanishing without a trace. The town was dying, and no one could stop it. I tried to warn the others, but they wouldn't listen. They were too afraid to believe, too desperate to hold on to the illusion of normalcy. But I knew. I had seen the faceless ones, heard their whispers, and I knew they were coming for us all. That night, I locked myself in my house, every window and door sealed tight. But it didn't matter. I could hear them outside, their footsteps soft but unmistakable. They were surrounding the house, closing in. The whispers filled the air, growing louder and more insistent, like a chorus of voices demanding to be heard. I sat in the dark, clutching the knife, my heart racing as the footsteps stopped just outside the door. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a soft knock, barely a sound, but enough to send a chill down my spine. I didn't answer. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by more, all around the house. A dozen knocks, then 24, growing in intensity until it sounded like the house itself was being pounded from all sides. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, voices screaming in unison, a cacophony of madness that made my head throb. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. I held my breath, waiting, but nothing came. The whispers were gone, the footsteps silent. For a moment, I dared to hope that it was over. But when I opened my eyes, I wasn't alone. The faceless figures stood in the room, surrounding me. Their featureless faces loomed in the darkness, watching without eyes, listening without ears. The whispers returned, but this time they were inside my head, a voice that wasn't mine, but spoke with chilling certainty. Come with us. And in that moment, I understood. The town was theirs now. It always had been, and there was no escape.